What do you want us to do about Mom breaking her arm? We're not doctors, you know. You could have figured out the hospital thing by yourself, right? Those words? They were cold, sharp enough to slice, digging right into my chest like a carving knife. I lay there on the ice-cold tile of my bathroom floor, every breath shuddered with pain, white-hot, stabbing, radiating from my right arm. But if I'm honest, it wasn't just the pain that kept me from getting up that night. No, it wasn't the broken bone at all. It was the emptiness, the despair I felt from the people I'd devoted my life to, a family that couldn't be bothered to care. That indifference. That was the wound that truly broke me. Later that night, after the house fell silent, I signed my name on the deed of sale for the home I'd protected for 42 years. By dawn, when my son and his wife woke up, not only was I gone, but the home, my home, was out of their lives too. Today, what I want to share with you is not a story of rage and revenge. No, this is the quiet story of a mother who was always a guest in her own family, an outsider under her own roof. This is about the quiet, determined departure I chose for the sake of my dignity. My name is Margaret Porter. I was born in 1946, in a small town tucked among the Adirondack foothills, upstate New York. Winters blanketed the fields in white, and the summers smelled of sweet grass, with the song of cicadas humming on the hills. The place was humble, but wild and beautiful. When I was young, I worked as a nurse at the county general hospital. It was hard work, demanding and never-ending, but I never once complained. Every patient I helped, every suffering eased, made me feel that life could restart, that I was worth something. At the age of 24, I met my husband, Alan. He'd been in an accident at a highway job site, a reserved man, but strong and so gentle that it filled a room. We fell for each other in the quiet, wordless way rural people do. Soon, we started our life together, moving into an old wooden house with a sagging porch and a pine out front. We didn't have much, just our jobs and our love and that drafty old house. Every morning, we headed in different directions for work. Every night, we'd share a simple supper, maybe beans or a casserole. Then we'd turn in early. That rhythm, the soft routine, gave me all the satisfaction I ever needed. But life always has its own plans, doesn't it? My son, Michael, had just turned 4 when Alan died in a scaffolding collapse at the site. That night, I was on night shift, and I'll never forget the phone call. "Mrs. Porter, I'm so sorry. We did everything we could." I remember standing in the parking lot, salty tears freezing on my cheeks as the snow poured down, sobbing until there were no tears left. But after that, I wiped my face and went back inside to the hospital floor. That night I learned there would be no giving up. Weakness simply wasn't an option. At 30, I became a single mother. I had no siblings, no parents left, so there was no one to lean on. I worked every shift they'd give me and came home to care for Michael, fighting to keep that old house full of Alan's memory alive. Friends, neighbors, co-workers all told me I'd be better off moving to the city, but I couldn't let go. Alan had painted every rafter, planted the vegetable garden out back. Michael had taken his first steps on that linoleum floor, had said, "Mommy," there for the very first time. I hung on to that house in the hopes of giving it to my son someday. I never seriously considered remarriage. It wasn't that I didn't have any chances. I did. But I was afraid to upset Michael's sense of peace. I kept working, saving a little each payday, including those kind New Year's baskets from former patients. Whenever Michael got sick, I'd pray hard, "Please, let me get through without needing to take too many days off." Every time Michael laughed or grinned, I'd feel it in my heart. It's all worth it. Every sacrifice. As years crept by, Michael grew up and got into college, leaving upstate for a job in New York City. I was proud, but a little lonely too. I thought, well, it's only natural. I'll stop being the center of his world. When Michael was 33, he came home for a visit, bringing his girlfriend, Laura. She worked in finance, was sharp, confident, and bright. I liked her straight away. I thought, if she sticks with Michael, he'll be happy for life. A year later, they had a small wedding at a church in White Plains. The newlyweds asked if they could stay at my house, just until they managed to buy a place. I couldn't have been happier. I quickly moved to the downstairs bedroom and let them have the 2 upstairs rooms. I patched up the kitchen, remodeled the bathroom, bought a new washer, bought new bedding. All I hoped for was to live out my days to the sounds of grandchildren's laughter, sharing meals together in the evenings, making Laura's favorite dishes, holding my grandbabies in my arms. It seemed simple. If I stayed humble, kept kind, worked hard, surely they'd value me. I truly believed that. But reality was much more complicated than I imagined. At first, everything was fine. Laura was polite and cheerful, always said, "Thanks, Mom," and Michael kept calling me Mom with that familiar lopsided grin. I kept cleaning, cooking, shopping, never expecting a payback. I didn't care about money or even having my name on anything anymore. All I wanted was to be useful, to help the family, to love them. Yet, as months slipped by, the atmosphere in the house began to shift. No one ever said a word about it, but the tone of voices, the long silences at dinner, it all spoke volumes. My cooking was too salty or too rich if I washed the dishes. It was, "You're getting the floor wet," if I walked down the hallway. It was, "Could you please walk softer? The baby's sleeping." I'd scold myself quietly. "Well, you're old now, Margaret. You're slow and clumsy. That's just how it is." Still, I kept holding out hope. If I just keep at it, they'll understand me one day. I kept swallowing my pride, believing I'd win them over with perseverance. I was wrong. I remember, plain as day, the first morning after Michael and Laura moved in. My heart was bursting with hope as I listened to their footsteps and laughter. 3 generations under one roof, I thought. That's the real American dream. That's what families do. I moved everything I owned to the tiny downstairs room. I let Michael and Laura take the upstairs. I moved things around in the kitchen, redid the plumbing, invested in a high-capacity washer. My old house, after 42 years, seemed to bloom with life every morning. I'd hear little feet pounding the stairs. Maybe I'll stick around a few more years, I told myself, smiling into my coffee. But that happiness didn't last. The big family honeymoon was brief, and then, slowly, I learned I was no longer a loved one, but had quietly slipped into the role of support staff. Somehow, almost all the chores were left to me. Cooking, laundry, dishes, dusting. I handled it without a word of complaint. When I was tired, I'd remind myself, Michael and Laura both work full-time outside the house. I'm lucky to be at home. Whenever Laura needed to work late, or went out with friends, I'd watch over my grandson Henry. I wasn't doing it for thanks, but because I thought, I'm helping. This is good. But Laura started changing. When I made dinner, she'd stop saying, thanks. Even when I'd cough, even when I was clearly hurting, no one bothered to check in. The warmth in Laura's voice faded. Instead, there was a cool, businesslike tone, and something unspoken, an icy pressure that hung over her every glance. I remember one night, after a long hospital shift, I'd just finished folding 2 loads of laundry and making chicken noodle soup for everyone. I sat at the kitchen table and listened to the familiar hum of the fridge, waiting for Michael and Laura to come home. When they arrived, Laura glanced at the soup and said, "Chicken again?" Michael barely looked up from his phone. As dinner finished, Laura gathered her bowl, paused by the sink, and instead of, "Thanks, Mom," all I got was, "The counter's a mess." Then she disappeared upstairs. I sat there for a few minutes, holding my coffee cup, searching for my name in their lives. And I didn't find it. It was as if I'd turned into a shadow, always present but never seen. After that, things grew colder. When I bought groceries, Laura started texting me detailed lists, brands, prices, quantities. "Don't bother with off-brands, Mom. That's what coupons are for." If I put clothes away, I got notes on how Laura likes things folded. Michael barely even bothered to tell me when he'd be late coming home. Then, one October morning, I slipped on the bathroom rug and fell hard, pain splitting right up my wrist. I lay there, calling and calling and calling, but no one answered. When they finally found me hours later, Laura's only words were, "Well, do you need an ambulance or what?" Michael muttered. "We're not doctors, Mom. Figure it out." That night, shivering in my empty little room, I understood. Really, finally understood what it felt like to be a guest in your own home. Not seen, not heard, not loved. Just expected to serve, expected to be grateful for what little I had. I pulled out a folder from the desk drawer, a folder I'd held onto since the day Alan died. Inside was the deed to the house, the legal documents for the title, and the form for a sale contract. I stared at those papers for a long time. The house wasn't just a building, it was my last shield, my final anchor in this world. Signing that contract was the hardest thing I'd done since Alan's funeral. But it was the only way left to hold on to my sense of self. When the sun rose, I was already gone. I moved my suitcase to a rental car, dropped the keys off with the realtor, and drove off before Michael and Laura ever woke up. The house, my fortress, belonged to someone else. Now, I don't tell this story out of anger or to point a finger. I share it because there are too many women like me, mothers, who become invisible, who get reduced to the role of support staff, a guest in their own home, who slowly lose their dignity. We think it's virtue to be silent, to make sacrifices, to expect nothing. But there comes a time when keeping silent is the same as letting yourself disappear. So I left. I took the money, approx. US $300,000, the sum total of my life's work and Alan's memory. And I started over. I used some to secure a comfortable room in a beautiful assisted living community outside Saratoga, a place bustling with other folks who'd chosen independence for their later years. I sent some to a charity supporting widows starting over, memories of Alan's kindness guiding me. I traveled, just a little. I saw the Grand Canyon, the cherry trees in D.C. I wrote Michael and Laura a letter telling them goodbye. Every word I wrote, every breath on the page, was for myself. These days, I'm not mom or support staff. I'm just Margaret, someone with my own history, my own choices, my own hope for a future. And that, at last, is dignity. That, at last, is my story. One day I had a bit of a cough as I moved about the kitchen in my old house, the house I'd watched over for almost half my life. As I set a damp dish towel down, Laura, my daughter-in-law, walked past, pausing for just a second. She wrinkled her brow ever so slightly and said, her words barely more than a whisper, "If you're not feeling well, please make sure you don't get Henry sick." It landed like a slap on my chest, one of those invisible blows you never see coming, but feel for hours after. I stood there, stuck in place, not sure whether to move or to answer, suddenly feeling like I'd taken up far too much space in my own kitchen. I just nodded as quietly as I could, lifted the towel to my mouth, and tried my best to get through the rest of the day in near silence. Each step careful, every sound kept small. It started then. That slow, sinking sense that I was slowly being eased out, little by little, from my own life. No one ever told me to leave, not in so many words. No one asked, and no one suggested I go. But something about dinner changed, an undercurrent at the table, separating the young folks' laughter from the spot where I always sat by the window near the kitchen. A line had been drawn, not visibly, but emotionally. It grew each day, pushing me further from their circle, farther from their warmth. I found myself talking less, not laughing, just listening, sometimes pretending to be busy even when there was nothing left to do. Some nights, after everyone had gone to bed, I'd putter around, straightening chairs or folding towels, asking myself if anyone would notice if I stopped. One evening, when Michael got home late from work, I tried to share what weighed on my heart. "I think Laura's been a bit cool with me lately," I whispered as I poured him a cup of coffee. But Michael just gave a small, tired laugh. "She's probably just stressed from work, Mom." Try to give her the benefit of the doubt. I nodded and kept my thoughts to myself. I wanted more than anything to believe he was right. That Laura's chilly tone was nothing more than exhaustion and pressure from her job. I wanted desperately to think things would get better if I just waited, kept working, kept my worries quiet. But then, little things kept happening. Each one small, easy to excuse in isolation, but together so heavy. That week, Henry, my grandson, needed his diaper changed. I got up to fetch everything from the hall closet. But I left a pot of catfish chowder simmering on the stove, and the next thing I knew, the bottom was scorched, blackened beyond repair. Without a word, Laura swept in, picked up the ruined pot, and dumped the whole thing into the trash. That night's dinner was a spread of store-bought deli salads, straight from their plastic containers. I apologized, feeling like a child. She didn't answer, just nodded at me with a blank face and cleared Henry's dish. When Henry came down with a fever, I stayed by his bed the whole night. I took his temperature every hour, laid fresh, cool towels on his forehead, held his hand when he whimpered. At dawn, Laura walked in and without even looking at me said, "Thank you for that, but make sure you sanitize the bedding, please." Maybe Laura wasn't trying to be cruel. Maybe she didn't realize how her words stung. The way each one clipped away another layer of affection between us. But their coldness ate away at my spirit just the same. Over time, I began to wonder, was I not really a member of the household anymore? Just a guest. One who happened to have a bedroom here but no longer belonged? I realized, suddenly, my meals had gotten smaller. I tossed and turned all night, often awake until dawn, my mind spinning in circles, never quite at rest. Never quite at rest. Even the taste of my favorite dish, old-fashioned baked catfish, was lost to me. Sometimes, when I was cleaning the living room floors or dusting under the couches, I'd overhear Laura on the phone, venting to a friend. It's exhausting. Living with your mother-in-law is never easy. If I say one word, I'm the bad guy, but I can't just ignore her either. I feel like I have to tiptoe around everything. I crouched there, out of sight, the damp rag clenched in my hands. The truth hit me hard. I was a problem for them, a bother and a burden, no matter how quiet or useful I tried to be. All I'd wanted was to help. I didn't ask for anything. I never wanted to be a nuisance. But I was. That was all they saw, a weight on their lives. From that day, a thought I'd never dared to acknowledge began to grow inside me. I pushed it down, but it wove its way into my heart. If I disappeared, would anyone even notice? And, chillingly, as the weeks crept on, I found myself thinking, no, probably not. Not really. So I changed, little by little. I stopped asking for anything. I learned to watch, to measure every sigh, every shift of eyes, the slam of a door, the hushed footsteps on the stairs. The atmosphere in the house had changed. There was no more warmth, no place at the table for my thoughts or feelings. I did nothing, at least on the outside. But a small crack had formed somewhere deep inside, a tiny fissure in the quiet stone of my heart. I could feel it in the way I moved slower, spoke less, and spent more and more time just listening to old radio shows or watching the world through the window. Still, that single hairline crack felt like a beginning of what? I didn't know. Maybe I was starting to accept things. Maybe it was the first time I really woke up to the truth of my own life. But I did know one thing for certain. If Laura ever repeated those same cold words, "If you're sick, please don't give it to Henry," I wouldn't be able to act like I hadn't heard. I wouldn't be able to just swallow it down, not anymore. I remember the afternoon it happened. The sky was thick and gray, the air sharp with a late winter chill. The wind, blowing in from the hills, cut to the bone. I tried to joke with Henry. "Looks like the weather's saying Grandma should take the day off and rest, don't you think?" But, as always, I set aside my aches and took to my chores. It was almost time for Easter. I wiped down the kitchen cabinets and sorted out the pile of old boxes in the garage. Simply keeping the house tidy and warm, it was all I had left to fill me up. After I finished preparing dinner, just a simple casserole, they never seemed to notice much. I hurried to the bathroom. My knees ached and my joints throbbed. This ever-changing weather always brought on the pain. I planned to wash up, warm my feet, catch my breath for a minute. But as I stepped away from the sink, my foot slid. A patch of wet tile sent me flying. It all happened so fast. No time to grab anything. My whole body tumbled. My right shoulder smashed against the edge of the tub. My knee slammed down with a crack on the tile. For a moment, the world went blinding white with pain. My ears rang, and even when I tried to catch my breath, my arm wouldn't work. One move, just a twitch, and a knife of pain shot from elbow to shoulder. I broke it, I thought, sure as I was standing, except I wasn't standing anymore. I was on the floor, and no one noticed. The house seemed frozen, silent as a graveyard. No one heard, no one came. Slowly, half crawling, I made my way out of the bathroom, soaked and shivering, knees burning with pain and humility. "It's my fault," I whispered, angry at myself. "You should have paid better attention. It's nothing. You'll be fine. Just keep going." But my body refused to listen. All I could do was grit my teeth and keep moving. I made it as far as the living room. There, by the old mirror, I could see Michael, my son, adjusting his tie. His dress shirt was a crisp white, his slacks freshly pressed, his shoes polished to a shine. On the table was a box wrapped up with care, a perfect little bow. Then, in a flash, I remembered today was Laura's mother's birthday. Choking back sobs, body trembling, I summoned the only words I could as I leaned against the wall. "Michael, honey, I think I broke my arm. Would you take me to the hospital?" He spun around, eyes wide. For a split second he looked concerned, but then, glancing at his watch, his brows drew together. "Right now? Mom, we're already running late for the party. Everyone's waiting for us over at Laura's parents' place." Before I could say another word, Laura swept down the stairs in a navy dress and heels, makeup flawless, hair fixed tight. She looked down at me, one eyebrow raised, and said, cool as a winter wind, "So your mother-in-law broke her arm. What are we supposed to do about it?" "It's not our problem. We're not doctors. Call a cab if you have to." Ooh. Just like that, I felt invisible again. Not a single word of comfort. Not, "Are you okay?" or "Does it hurt?" Just those cold, cold eyes, barely even seeing me. It was clear then, clearer than ever, I was not, and would never be their priority. Even as I lay unable to stand, racked with pain, I was nothing more than an inconvenience. I looked down, clutching my sleeve to keep the tears from showing. I didn't want them to see me break, not even now. Even as my heart was being torn clean in two, I was determined not to let it show. I made my way back to my room, cradling my right arm. The ache? A steady throb beneath the surface. I moved slowly, careful not to bump the doorframe or catch my shoulder as I edged around the dresser. I reached for my cell phone from the top drawer. A new habit. One born out of necessity these last few years, as independence started to matter in a different way. My hands shook, not just from pain, but from something deeper, a kind of pride that slipped away with every tap of my thumb across the glass. I pulled up the number for a private ambulance service. I'd heard about them not long ago, from a neighbor whose husband fell and needed quick help when no family was around. The thought stung a little. I'd always imagined I'd have family or some kind soul, fee, to watch out for me. But here I was, just me, in a quiet house gone cold with indifference. The dispatcher's voice on the line was calm and gently southern. "You just sit tight, ma'am. We'll be there as quick as we can." She didn't ask about insurance or make me feel small. Not once did she question why I was calling for myself, not for someone else. I set the phone down, stared at the beige walls, tried to steady my breath. Each moment, a piece of self-respect seemed to chip off inside me, fluttering like dust I couldn't sweep away. After about 20 minutes, I heard a vehicle in the drive. The shimmer of red and blue lights filtered through the window, bouncing off the old maple outside. My legs were uncertain as I moved toward the front door. I braced myself on every surface I passed. No one came to see me off, and that memory would sting for a long while. The hollow silence of a family gone from the picture, everyone too interested in their own plans to look back or call out a simple, "Take care, Mom." Michael, my son, Must have gone out ahead. I saw him, through the rain-fogged windshield, already sitting in the family car, turning the key focused on getting his wife and son to Laura's parents' place for her mother's birthday. He glanced back when I hobbled out, maybe about to say something, but then, jaw tight, he turned away and pulled off. He didn't want to be late. And by then, the truth was as plain as the aching sky. I didn't expect, nor hope for, anything else. The paramedic who got out to meet me was a kind-eyed man, likely around my own son's age. He put out his hand but didn't touch, just guided, gentle with his words. In the rearview mirror, he offered, "Should I call someone for you? A daughter or your husband? Maybe your son?" His tone was considerate, careful, like he already knew the answer. I shook my head, words stuck somewhere deep. "No. I'm used to going alone," I said, voice only just above a whisper. At the hospital, things happened quickly. My coat was draped across my lap. My purse sat next to me as they wheeled me down clinical, silent halls. The air was heavy with the tang of antiseptic. They moved me to a bright white room, and the ceiling seemed bigger than the sky itself. There were the scrapes of rubber gloves, the rip of surgical tape, the squeak of a curtain. Each sound rang through me, not just in my ears, but in the brittle places inside my heart that ached for any crumb of warmth. A nurse, young and gentle-faced, looked me over with worry. She spoke in tones I recognized from years ago, when I was the one in charge of caring. "Did you come by yourself? Do you have any family coming?" she asked, trying so hard not to sound accusatory or pitying, just human. I nodded quietly. I didn't dare to open my mouth. I wasn't sure what would come out if I did. Anger or tears or just a flood of all the countless words I'd swallowed over the years. She touched my uninjured hand gently, offering a little cup of water. "I'm glad you called right away. That was the right thing. When you get home, will someone be with you? It's going to be really tough with your dominant arm out of commission," she said. Voice soft as warm milk. "Any chance for help from family, neighbors, maybe someone checking in?" I forced a small smile. "I'll try." But inside, I understood full well. No one would be there. X-rays confirmed the break. My right elbow, badly fractured. They set my arm in a thick cast, the weight of it awkward and unfamiliar. "You'll need to keep it immobilized for at least 6 weeks, the doctor said. Each word heavy as a verdict. "Please do your best to rest. No strenuous activity." I shuffled out to the waiting area with a slip of paper clutched in my left hand. Prescription, discharge instructions, and a referral for follow-up. The waiting area was filled with people, mostly elderly folks, surrounded by their children or even grandchildren, speaking quietly, patiently explaining things or getting a blanket. There I sat alone, like a ghost. For the first time, I understood viscerally the meaning of being invisible. The world moved around me, bustling and noisy, and yet none of it had anything at all to do with me. I looked at the doctor's note in my hand. Right elbow fracture. Cast immobilization. 6 weeks, restrict all use of dominant arm. The words brought my mind to tomorrow. Who would make my meals? Who would wash my hair? Who would help with medication or the day-to-day stuff no one thinks about when they're healthy? The answer circled, plain and sharp, no one. I'd once believed wholeheartedly that if I gave everything, if I sacrificed, my family would love me forever in return, that I could earn their gratitude, their care, by working quietly in the background. But in that cold waiting room, pride dissolved into the air like steam. Even if the mother falls, no one comes running. If she is to stand up again, she does it, in the end alone. I sat there a long while. I'd collected my shadowy little bag of pills and the paperwork that proved, once more, how broken I was, but I couldn't bring myself to move. I watched as the hospital grew quieter, as dusk fell outside and a thin line of wind slipped through the seams of my coat. The young nurse peeked back in, offering again, "Would you like a wheelchair to the taxi area?" Her voice was kind, not rushed. I shook my head once. No. I wanted, just this once, to walk on my own 2 feet, no matter the pain. The cast on my arm hung heavy and white in front of me, as if holding the sum of my grief. Each step stabbed my shoulder, a clear signal from my body that I would never again be the same as I'd been. Yet, if I was being honest, it wasn't the sharp pain that hurt most. What really ached. The thing that drove all breath from my lungs was the look of indifference that Michael, my only child, had fixed on his face. Not cruelty, not even anger, just a flat absence where I'd hoped for love. Standing beneath the hospital's bright flood lamps, I stared across the parking lot. The night wind rattled the bus stop sign. Off to the left, a man who must have been about my age waited for a taxi, clutching a faded blue tote, shivering in a threadbare jacket. Our eyes met for an instant, and we nodded at each other. We knew, without a single syllable, the weight of loneliness, weariness, and resignation. His cab came and he got in, carefully managing the door himself, hunched and slow but self-reliant. When mine arrived, the young driver sized me up, eyebrows creasing in concern. "Ma'am, you just make sure you're comfortable back there, okay? If bumpy roads hurt, I'll take it slow." I nodded, mumbling a soft thanks, and settled myself in. The glass fogged up beside me, casting the city lights into a soft blur. We cruised through familiar streets, street lamps glowing in neat rows, houses huddled in tightly wound neighborhoods, windows glowing against the night. I saw families gathering for a late supper, laughter spilling out behind their doors. The world was lit up like happiness on parade. But not for me, not tonight. Idly stroking the papers laid across my lap, I asked myself the question that had haunted my sleep for months now. If I collapsed again, would anyone know? Would anyone care? Or would I slip, quietly and entirely, from all the hearts that had ever known me, vanishing alongside forgotten boxes and outdated linens? I remembered the old days, how different it all felt when Alan was alive. If I so much as twisted my ankle, he would be there, hugging me, fussing, making sure I was okay. When he died, I'd made a promise that I'd give Michael both a mother and a father, that I wouldn't let him lack. For anything, least of all love. I'd kept that promise. But now, tonight, the blunt truth was unshakable. No matter how I fell, no one reached out anymore. Whatever comfort there once was had bled out, replaced by a silence thick as snow. The pain, now, was duller. More of a deep ache soaking through all my bones than that sharp first shock. It burrowed in, subtle and broad, in the space where I'd always kept my sense of belonging. I thought quietly, in rhythm with the slow turn of the wheels, what was all of this for? Had I lived for Michael's happiness? Or just out of fear of facing my own aloneness? A cold question, but real. The car turned down my little side street, almost home. I straightened my shoulders, tugged my coat tighter, brushed my cheek. My fingertips came away damp with tears I hadn't noticed, but I wiped them away. I wouldn't walk through the door, defeated. But if I let myself admit it, maybe I'd already lost this fight a while ago. No anger left. No more room for sorrow or blame. Just one emotion was left to stand on, clear, strong, and commandingly simple. It's time to choose. We pulled into my driveway, nearly 11 p.m. The porch light still glowed. Someone had left the gate open. It almost looked the way it always did, as though the house had been waiting for me. Inside, everything was quiet. The kind of quiet that's heavier than any noise. I opened the door gently. No cheerful, "Welcome home, Mom." No shuffling feet. No sign anyone had even wondered where I'd gone. A faint scent of birthday cake hung in the air. The dining table was set as if frozen in a snapshot. Open bottle of red wine, empty glasses, plates scattered with cake melting into crumbs and frosting, fork tossed aside, napkins undone. The chairs were askew, like people had just left in a hurry, and maybe, for them, they had. For me, it was just another scene where I'd played no part. I stood for a long time in the kitchen I'd scrubbed clean, where every drawer held bits of my life. Now, it felt as if the curtain had dropped after a play. Someone else's laughter echoed in the distance, but the heart of the house, my heart felt hollow. Everything was in disarray. and inside me was only empty space. I headed for my room, the hospital pharmacy bag tucked awkwardly in my left hand, my right arm still suspended in that blinding white cast and sling. Every step sent a fresh pulse of pain through my shoulder, a deep ache that radiated outward. But I didn't make a sound. I didn't call out or ask for anyone's help. I just quietly made my way down the hallway, each step a small act of silent resolve. And right then, it truly hit me, clear as day. I really was alone. I set the bag of pills on the old kitchen chair and sat quietly, doing my best to steady my breathing. My eyes wandered around the small first-floor room that had become my world. On one wall hung a faded photo of Alan and me from decades past, a snapshot of us standing by this very house, Alan in his battered work clothes, broad hand resting on my shoulder, both of us laughing as if nothing bad could ever happen. Even now, his gaze in that picture seemed to ask me, low and serious, "How much longer do you plan to go on this way?" I dropped my head and, with my trembling left hand, opened the top drawer of the worn wooden desk. A desk that had seen the best and the loneliest days of my life. Inside was a small, fireproof safe I'd owned for 20 years. Its black surface smudged with age. Only I knew the code by heart, Michael's birthday. The day that used to feel like the happiest in my whole life. Click, click, click. I worked the dial slowly, my fingers stiff and a little numb, until the lock gave way with a sharp, sure click. Inside, everything was orderly, wrapped in airtight bags, property deed, the house title, savings account statements, insurance papers, all in my name. Every sheet a record of ownership, a kind of shield I'd clung to through every storm. I reached for the property deed, the paper soft and a little yellowed from years of careful handling. For 40 years, I'd guarded it as if wrapping both arms around my past and the future I thought I would leave for my family. My hope, always, had been simple: that this house would stay in our family long after I was gone, a place for Michael or for Henry or for any child needing to come home. But now I could see so plainly, this house itself was what kept me distant from my own family. I'd never, not once, seriously considered transferring the deed, not even when Michael, on more than one occasion, had nudged, "Maybe it's time to get all the family assets in one name? Makes things simpler for everyone, Mom." I always changed the topic, not because I didn't trust Michael. I just believed, deep down, that I could only let go when I felt truly, solidly sure. When things felt safe. Right. But tonight I understood for the first time, deep in my bones, maybe there was no one left I needed to protect this house for. If so, then at least I ought to finally defend my own future with my own two hands. My casted arm heavy on my lap, I reached for my cell phone, the screen bright in the dark. I searched the name of the lawyer who'd helped me with Alan's will after all. Those years ago, Samuel Barker. I hadn't spoken to him in ages. As soon as his name popped up on the screen, Mr. Barker, attorney at law. My breath caught, chest tightening like someone clamped a fist around my heart. Still, I pressed the call button. 3 rings. Then his answering machine picked up. I waited on the line, measured every word carefully before speaking. "This is Margaret Porter. I need to see you first thing tomorrow, please. It's about urgent matters relating to the property. Name on the deed. Please call me back as soon as you can." Phone down, I sat a while, still gripping the property deed as if it was the last rope keeping me from slipping away for good. I didn't turn on a light. I just sat there, in the soft sort of darkness that fills up after midnight, except for the glow filtering down the hallway through a crack in the door. The only sounds were the brush of wind at the glass and the dry scratch of leaves blowing across the patio stones out back. I looked over again at the photo of Alan on the wall, his warm hand on my shoulder, his eyes so vividly alive, and I found myself whispering, so low only my own heart could hear it, "Will there be any point to calling this place home if it doesn't hold a spot for me anymore? Maybe I was wrong to think this old house would always be my safe place." Maybe it was time to accept what I'd resisted for years. I didn't belong, not here, not now. Not in the way I once did. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not for the pain in my shoulder, though it burned sharp each time I shifted. But for something deeper, something pulling at my heart. The kind of pain that you can't heal with medicine. Thin lines of memory kept running through my mind, endless and sharp as glass. So, you're going to the hospital? But we have to go see Laura's family today, Mom. Your mother-in-law broke her arm. Not really our problem, is it? I didn't feel any anger. Maybe I'd passed that point. All that remained was tiredness, like finishing up a very long journey and realizing you've nowhere left to push onward. I lay there, thinking of the appointment I'd requested. The decision? Clear and cold. By tomorrow, my life would start to change. I knew this would be something only I could do for myself. Sometimes, to protect your dignity, there's no need to shout or fight. Just walk forward, quiet but firm. Once again, I held the deed close, tracing the block letters. Margaret Porter, clear as day, underneath all the old signatures. The document hadn't changed at all, not over 4 decades. What had torn was only my own heart. Maybe those old tears and rips in my heart would, somehow, allow in something new, a light of some kind, something braver or truer. I wanted to believe that. Tomorrow, I would drive to Samuel Barker's law office. And for the first time in all my years, I would act, not for my son's benefit, or for anybody else's, but for myself. I poured myself a cup of warm water from the kettle, taking a careful sip. But the bitterness wouldn't leave my tongue, a bitterness nothing to do with painkillers. This was the bitterness of loneliness. An old presence that I'd stuffed away, never naming it, never letting myself admit it was there. Now, loneliness sat with me like a childhood friend. Familiar, chilly, but not completely unwelcome. I moved to the window and eased the curtain back. Beyond the glass, a thin mist drifted through the street, the yellow from the neighbor's porch light pooling over the shingles of their little house. Every other house on the block was already dark. Every family sunk into hush and sleep, except mine. Was my porch light still burning just because I couldn't sleep? Or because, for once, no one but me cared whether it was on or off? I let my eyes fall to the garden. Last month, I'd planted some chrysanthemums in the soft April earth, but a late frost had nearly finished them off. Only a few ragged blooms still clung to the stems, their petals fluttering away with each gust until they scattered across the bricks in the yard, a quiet little snowfall of color. I thought back to the day I'd first moved into the downstairs room, the day I quietly handed the heart of the house over to Michael and Laura, telling myself it was only right, that a little humility, a quiet step backward, would keep the peace, would hold the family together. But now I knew. Once you step back far enough, there's no one waiting to call you back in. I stood up slowly, bracing with my good hand, and slid open the little drawer beside my bed. Inside, carefully ordered, were old letters and cards, Michael's childish birthday surprises, Henry's crayon scribbles, some photos from the best days with Alan before he died. I picked up the picture of Alan, caught in mid-laugh in his dirty work shirt, his palm still resting protectively on my shoulder. I could almost feel the weight and heat of that hand, even after all these years. Those eyes, soft and sure, had always trusted me, always seen me. "I'm sorry," I whispered so softly. "I should have done this sooner. But it's enough now, isn't it? Nobody in the room but me." But I could finally say what I'd buried in my heart. For years and years, I returned the photo to its place and reached instead for the small brown notebook at the back of the drawer. I'd begun it the day Michael got married. In it, I'd filed away grocery lists, important messages, doctor's visits, notes on the kids' colds and coughs, a record of everything I did to keep the house humming, to make sure no one lacked anything. But as I flipped through, something became plain as daylight. Not a single sentence about myself. Not my own dreams, nor my pain, nor my wishes. Just an endless, silent account of all I'd given up. The last page was still blank, crisp, and new. I took up my pen in my awkward left hand and, slow and shaking, began, at last, to write. Today, I begin a new story for myself. I am more than a mother, and more than a name on a deed or a supper on the table. I am Margaret Porter, and I am enough. The ink trembled on the white page, my signature fragile but entirely my own. Outside, the mist deepened, the wind chased petals on the ground. In that quiet, for the first time in decades, I let myself hope. Not for a return to the past, not for a family's gratitude, but just for the chance to claim one small bit of peace, my peace, all my own. If someday you come back to this room and the view outside has changed, please remember this. There are things in this world that, once lost, money will never return. I closed the brown notebook. These words were not meant to blame anyone. I only wanted them heard just once before I left. Tomorrow morning, I will leave this house, not as someone kicked out. No, I go as the owner of this house. If anyone asks me, why, I won't have to answer. Why should I? I have already answered every single day, simply by the life I have lived in this quiet home. Age. At 5 a.m., my eyes blinked open. So many years now, that time's branded into my bones, habit shaped by decades. But today was different. I did not rise to cook breakfast, not to wipe the floors, not to start laundry, nor to simmer oatmeal for my grandson's waking. No, this morning I woke for one purpose and one purpose only, to walk away. The house was stiller than ever before. The kitchen clock ticked so loudly it almost echoed. Outside the windows, night lifted slowly, blue shadows melting into the first slant of dawn. Lights slipped through the crack in the living room curtains, gathering over the beige tablecloth I washed each week. I reached beneath the bed and pulled out a battered little suitcase. I'd carried it before, back when visiting distant cousins or taking Henry, my grandson, to a family reunion. It held just a few changes of clothes, my woolen scarf, medicine bottles, and, of course, the brown notebook, my record. Not of complaints or tally marks, but the reminder. I tried my best. I tried to live honestly. Before I left my room, I placed Henry's old body pillow back atop his bed. The faded cover still bore a tiny bear, smile worn threadbare. I left it there, knew, deep in my soul, that I had no place in his future memories. I would not take that from him. I stepped quietly into the kitchen, that well-used kingdom where I'd made thousands of meals across all these years. Not today. Instead, I took down a wooden serving tray and lined up 3 things, side by side, gentle as handling a blessing. First, a stack of crisp legal pages, photocopies of everything official. At the top, in heavy blue pen, property sale and title transfer agreement. Amount, approx. US $273,000. Paid, 50%. Second, a letter in my own awkward, left-handed scrawl still shaky after the break. I'm sorry for being a burden to you both. I have decided to quietly leave this house and quietly leave your hearts too. I won't blame you. It's only that I finally see how it is. Third, a set of old house keys. Dangling from them, a porcelain flower keychain, the one Alan bought for my 34th birthday when he came home from a work trip out west. I pressed it once between my palms, remembering how it felt to be truly given something, freely and with love. I set all 3 in the very middle of the dining table, that crossroads where, so much family life had pulsed and blossomed for so long. That table became the place where I at last brought all my hope, endurance, and patience to a full stop. I left no tears behind. No sighs either. Only one thing remained in the air when I walked out, a quiet, unquestioned freedom, my right to choose for myself, to leave. I dragged my suitcase out toward the front door. Passing the living room, I paused. On the bookshelf, Henry's favorite storybooks lined up like old friends. Beside them, the wedding photo of Michael and Laura, 2 radiant smiles. Nowhere in that silver frame, no space for me. I looked out over the house, not with longing, but simply to say a silent goodbye. Goodbye to everything I'd once called family. I opened the door and stepped outside. The air was brisk, edges still edged with leftover cold, pink morning light just spilling over the rooftops. The driveway gleamed with dew, the sidewalk slick and dark. My hands shook a little, lowering the suitcase down one step at a time. My feet weren't as steady as they once were. But my heart? Quiet, calm, and settled for the first time in years. I did not turn back. I closed the door softly, leaving no noise for the empty halls. I left no words hanging in the air either. Today my voice spoke not through what I said, but the fact that I was choosing to go. Right on time, the cab taking me to Samuel Barker's law office waited at the curb. Samuel met me with a look part warm, part sheepish. He'd always seemed half embarrassed to be involved in such deeply personal matters. He greeted me in a gentle voice. Mrs. Porter, are you absolutely sure? I nodded. There was no hesitation in me anymore. I've protected that house for over 40 years, Samuel. But now, the only purpose the house serves is to remind everyone I'm not there anymore. He didn't ask anything further. He simply led me through the steps. The buyers, a couple who taught school a county over, both nearing retirement, looking for a place with peace and space for gardening, arrived with joined hands and hopeful faces that mirrored an earlier, softer time. Watching them glance sideways at one another, I thought, yes, perhaps this house will finally, truly become a real home at last. The sale was already half paid by wire from their bank approx. US $136,000. The remainder, Samuel explained, would come next month. Alongside all official title transfers, I also entrusted Samuel to handle my change of address and the formal withdrawal of my old residency for the city rolls. When every form had been signed, every copy sealed in its gray legal envelope, I rose from my chair. As he walked me to the entrance, Samuel, with a little worry in his eyes, asked quietly, Mrs. Porter, do you have any other family anywhere to help you? I smiled and gently shook my head. I haven't lost my family. I'm just no longer going to guard what is no longer families to me. I checked into a tiny hotel just off the main street near the train station. Just a place to land for a few days. After that, I'll move into the assisted living community Samuel recommended. Not a sterile old folks' home, but a lively place where folks have their own space, meals brought to them, friends right down the hall. A place for independent older folks who remembered dignity. On my way there, I stopped by a corner coffee shop I'd passed 1,000 times. Across these many years and never once entered on my own. The woman behind the counter, a silver-haired, friendly owner, smiled wide. Her hair tied up in a blue scarf, arms strong from decades at the espresso machine. I picked the window seat. I ordered a single cup of hot coffee, no hurrying needed. No one waiting for a meal, no one asking me to mop up, no shopping list tucked in my pocket, no child tugging at my sleeve. I sipped. The bitterness swept my tongue, filling me with a sadness, but an honest sadness, a true one, with a little undertone of something else. Relief, freedom. I opened my brown notebook and, slowly, with my left hand, wrote my last words for the day. Today, for the very first time, I chose myself, for myself alone. When I stepped back outside, I realized the world was bigger than I'd remembered. I flagged a cab and returned to my hotel. My room was small. 3rd floor, 1 bed, just a shower tucked into the corner. It was nothing fancy, not even roomy, but it felt clean and quiet. That, I realized, made it worth more than any mansion with air filled thick by disappointment. I opened the door and paused. The gentle scent of new lumber and the subtle aroma of green tea from the tea bag laying on a tray. I felt, suddenly, able to breathe deep down to my toes for the first time in years. I slipped my coat onto its hanger and pulled the window open, letting sunshine spill in and fill the room. Down below, the street was already coming alive. A delivery van idled at the curb, a woman in a red jacket laughing down her cell. The breeze carrying voices up the alley. For the first time in decades, I felt, truly, a part of the world again. I remembered how, not so long ago, I'd stood by the stove, half hidden by steam, hands buried deep in cleaning, my body all but invisible. That was over. Now I belonged here just as much as anyone else. I sat at the desk and opened my little suitcase. On top was my brown notebook. I turned to last night's entry and smiled, reading the words over and over, my own words, my new beginning. Iskrate. XK. Maybe, somewhere, Michael and Laura will wonder where I've gone. Maybe Henry, years from now, will find my note, that old brown notebook, and read through all the invisible things his grandmother once did. But none of that is up to me now. I chose this day, and I chose it for myself. From this moment on, I am not a guest in anyone's life. I am Margaret Porter. And for the first time in so long, that is enough. The handwriting was just a bit slanted, the ink faint in places, but the feelings written there, every single word, stood clear as daylight. I have left this house, and your hearts too, just as you all wished. What surprised me most was that I felt no pain anymore. Instead, a quiet relief spread through my chest. It was almost as if, after enduring a long, burning fever, my whole body had finally settled calm and steady once more. And at that moment, I understood so vividly that true freedom isn't about running away, but about finding the courage to take your first step, on your own 2 feet, away from the place where you've hurt for so long. I went to my suitcase and pulled out the lease and the proof of deposit for my new place at a nearby independent living residence for seniors. In just a few days, I'd be moving there. It has a small kitchen of my own, a balcony that overlooks a park and the gentle rise of distant hills. Best of all, it's a place where my worth isn't measured by my age alone. I made up my mind right then. This afternoon, I'd buy myself a new teapot, and I'd make braised fish, seasoned like Alan always loved it. But not for anyone else this time. Only for me. No one would complain about the smell. No one would scold or sneer at me. It would just be me, the gentle hush and the clink of my own silverware. How many years had it been? My heart felt truly empty, but not hollow or sad. It was something else entirely. That, I thought, must be what a real beginning feels like. It became official in early May, right when spring rain let up and the dogwoods in the park burst into bloom. Samuel Barker, my lawyer, handled all the paperwork, quickly and smoothly, just like my decision itself, clear, unwavering. I never once went back to the old house. It was once my home. Now, the warmth had drained away, not a single ember left. The buyers were a retired couple, both teachers. They planned to renovate the place, put in new windows, and build a little old-fashioned inn with rocking chairs out on the porch. They said, Samuel told me this later, they wanted to preserve the spirit of an old American home. When I heard that, I just smiled softly. Even if it's not a home for family anymore, if someone out there can find beauty and meaning in it, perhaps it'll still count as a real home to somebody. But, to be honest, I never imagined how much trouble the sale would stir up among the old residents of that house. 3 days after Samuel sent out the required 30-day move-out notice, the missed calls from Michael, my son, began piling up on my phone. At first, just 1 call, then 3, then 8, and by evening, 15. The first text came, early in the morning. Mom, what's going on? I didn't write back. By lunchtime, another message appeared. Mom, what happened with the house? There were people here doing a tour. They said you sold it, is that for real? I set the phone down on the nightstand. The cast on my arm was almost healed by then, but a different ache pressed on inside. Resolved, yes, but also a tangle of something sorrowful. That night, a message, far longer than usual, arrived from Laura. She almost never wrote to me, and certainly not with paragraphs and paragraphs. I don't understand what's happening. What are you trying to do, Mom? This house is where we've built our life. If you're upset, just say so. But like this, do you want us out in the street? I sat and stared at her words a while, Then, finally, sent back just a single line. It wasn't anger that made me sell. I did it because I was never actually seen as someone who belonged. Because to you, I was only ever just a guest. After that, the barrage of messages stopped. How they felt, what they did, that was no longer my concern. Who did you run to? Who got the blame? Those questions, well, they should have been asked before those careless, stinging words came out. So what if your mother-in-law broke her arm? That's not our problem, is it? The money from the sale reached me in 2 payments. After legal fees and taxes were taken out, I had about $273,000 in hand. For some, I'm sure, that would be retirement security. For me, it was a final, well-earned reward for my courage to let go. I decided to divide that money into 3 parts. The first, $105,000, went into a long-term savings account. That would carry me through the rest of my life. Quiet, independent, nothing from anyone. All I needed was a simple apartment, plain food, doctor's visits now and then, just that, no more. The second $70,000 became a small foundation, under Alan's name, the Allen Fund, supporting elder independence. I partnered with a local nonprofit so that someone out there could have a warm meal, or hear a friendly, "How are you today?" when it matters most. I remembered too well what it's like to break a bone in lonely silence, to have to call the ambulance yourself because no one is watching or worried. That's a loneliness I'd spare anyone if I could. And the last part? That one was for me, travel money. For my first trip, just for myself, in over 40 years. Nothing flashy, just slow, careful journeys through small American towns. Dogwoods blooming in April, old riverfront inns, a bowl of homemade chicken noodle soup brought out when it rains. Little pockets of everyday peace and surprise. I'd already mapped out the beginning. Next week, I'd visit Asheville in the Carolinas. After that, maybe a week in the mountains near Brattleboro. If my health held up, I hoped to see autumn leaves and hot spring resorts in New Hampshire come fall. No traveling companion. Only a small suitcase and a secondhand camera, barely out of the box. One bright afternoon in May, while I was drinking tea on the shaded porch of a bed and breakfast, a letter arrived. The sender, Michael. The paper was new, the ink still sharp, but his handwriting, even now, looked just like when he was small. Dear Mom, I've been reading your messages over and over. I don't really know what to say. But, if I could go back, I wish I'd found better words for you. How are you doing? I'm sorry things ended up like this. I folded the letter and slipped it into my notebook. I didn't reply right away. Because, as I knew too well now, real regret isn't about words. The only way to truly change is to live different. That night, I walked along the edge of the lake. The moon was rising slow and bright, hanging over the water. On a stone bench nearby, I saw an elderly couple, holding hands and speaking together so softly that the breeze nearly carried their voices away. I sat on the bench beside them, opened my journal, and wrote. I once believed that growing old meant waiting for children and grandchildren to come back to you, but now I know growing old means returning to yourself. You can lose your house, you can lose your family, but you must never, ever lose your dignity. From the moment I left that house, I slowly, quietly, began to listen again for the sound of my own heartbeat. No more leaping out of bed to toss together lunchboxes or scramble for children's socks. I woke up gently, stepped onto the narrow balcony outside my small apartment, looked out over the trees as sunlight sifted through their new green leaves, and asked myself, for the first time, how did I live so long and forget to see mornings this beautiful? That's how my real new life began. Not as mom, not as helper or guest, but wholly and simply as myself, Margaret Porter. To the woman I meet in the mirror now, to the world that waited quietly outside my window, I say, soft and proud, this life is mine, and mine alone. And at last, that is enough. In the late afternoons, I like to walk through the neighborhood park a few streets over, It's mostly folks around my age there. Some greeting familiar faces, others quietly going about their routines. On any given day, you'll find old friends hunched over their checkers board on the stone benches, sliding plastic pieces back and forth, pausing every so often to tease each other over a bold move. Down by the old community garden, gray-haired couples weed and water plots bursting with zinnias or fuss over tiny potted boxwoods, discussing each blossom as if it's a grandchild. I never rushed to belong to their circle. I simply observed the way the light catches on silver hair, the everyday kindness and small talk, the contentment of folks who've learned to savor company without demanding anything more. Sometimes, when one of them would burst out laughing, I couldn't help but smile too. That simple, easy laughter. A reminder that you're never truly alone when someone nearby remembers joy. One day, as dusk crept in and the streetlights started to flicker, I watched a little girl crumple onto the curb at the edge of the walking path. Her laces had come undone again. Beside her, her mother bent low, knees creaking as she set aside her tote bag to retie those tangled knots. There was no impatience, no hurried scolding, only gentle, slow words and quiet encouragement. When the knots were firm, the girl gripped her mother's hand, and together they walked off at a snail's pace, united in their own small world. I watched them go, arms swinging, their silhouettes fading into the golden light, and something inside me warmed, softer than I'd felt in years. It struck me then, loving someone isn't about doing everything for them. It isn't even about solving each day's little messes or picking up every piece. It's about being there present and steady when they need you most. It's about bearing witness, offering your hand without taking over. All my life, I'd been the ever-available fixture. The mother-in-law who never asked for thanks. The quiet helper who made sure dinner was hot and the fridge was full. The one who faded low so others could shine. I thought I was practicing love. No demands, no complaints, no conditions. But lately, I've begun to wonder, was it really love? Or just the old habit of forgetting myself? For decades, I lived wrapped in duty, always doing, always giving, always trying to outserve my own loneliness. Only when the daily calls for, "Mom, where's my shirt?" or, "Could you watch Henry just a few hours?" finally went silent. Did it start to dawn on me? Maybe I deserve to hear my real name now and then too, so let me introduce myself properly this time. I'm Margaret Porter. In another chapter of my life, I was a nurse, bending over beds at County General, squeezing the hands of scared patients through so many midnight shifts. Once, I was a new wife, married to Alan, the blue-collar boy who loved old westerns and strong coffee. I was a mother to Michael, a single mom, after tragedy made that word true. And then, for many years, keeper of the family flame. The quiet force behind every hot meal, every patch of garden, every mended shirt. Now, at age 78, I am something else. Someone on the road to rediscovering what it means just to be herself, a human. Being first, not just someone's backup. If not for what happened this spring, if I hadn't reached my breaking point, if silence and heartache hadn't finally snapped me free, I might still tell myself that old story. Old mothers are supposed to live with their children and grandchildren, putter around the house, be grateful for scraps. But I know better now, because there is another path, a path meant not for the benefit of others, but for my own soul. It's been over 2 months since I left that house. I do not wake to the brisk clang of the alarm clock, or to the crash of slippered feet rushing down the hallway to work or school. Instead, dawn finds me when it's ready, soft sunlight warming my cheeks through an open window, birdsong drifting in from a stand of birches behind my new apartment. Every morning, I brew a cup of lotus tea. I'd always loved its delicate taste, though I used to save it for guests, never thinking I was allowed to be one. Now, I make it for myself, pouring slow, letting the steam rise. I eat in peace. No one criticizes the seasoning. No one sighs that it's too bland or too salty. Meal by meal, eating has turned from duty to delight. I read now, truly read. The books that gathered dust on my someday shelf novels and memoirs long deferred while I was busy folding someone else's towels or running errands. I try my hand at embroidery, slow and clumsy as a schoolgirl, fumbling through stitches with more patience for my own awkwardness than I've shown myself in years. Each time I finish a small piece, a daisy, a patchwork star, some part of my heart is tenderly soothed. I even keep a diary now, not a record of complaints or regrets, but a true journal. I write about the first morning I spent alone in this new space, how unexpectedly calm I felt. I note the small joys, like washing my favorite old sweater just because I wanted it clean, with nobody scolding about wasting water. I inscribed the day when Mrs. Reynolds, who runs the local diner, leaned out the window and called me by my real name, Margaret, not ma'am or sweetie, or worst of all, an unspoken nothing. And in all this time, I have not once blamed Michael or Laura. I know, now, that I passed through anger into something quieter and more honest. I see it truly. The gap between us was never made by a single harsh word or a single hasty slight. That distance grew from all the times, big and small, that I chose silence to keep the peace. Every dinner unremarked, every time I held my tongue for fear of ruining the mood, every private ache held behind a closed door. These stacked up like bricks, until there was hardly room left to breathe. It is possible, I've learned, for people to look close yet live years apart. For a house that appears welcoming, warm, to feel like little more than a place to wait out life's storms. For roles that look respectable, mother, grandmother, matriarch to suffocate, unless there is respect to match. The other day, as I circled the path at the park, I noticed a woman about my age sitting on a bench beneath the willows. She wore a tan cardigan, hair pinned up in careful twists, reading an old paperback with the corners bent from love. I introduced myself softly. "Good afternoon," and sat beside her. We didn't exchange life stories. We didn't need to. For a long stretch, we simply watched the sun pass over hydrangeas and listened to the breeze cutting through the grass. Two old women, quiet but close, carrying their long years together in companionable silence. Eventually, she turned to me and spoke in a voice both shy and strong. I spent decades believing I was just living in my children's shadow. Lately, though, I'm starting to see a shadow isn't such a bad thing. If I stand in my own light, it belongs to me. I laughed softly, the deepest laugh in years, too, because her words landed where I live, in the tender place behind my ribs. We began to meet every few days after that, sharing books, splitting sandwiches on chilly afternoons, brewing tea in careful cups. We didn't need to do for one another. We only had to be. And that was enough. When I left Michael and Laura's house, I expected to feel ache, maybe a great, consuming sadness. But in truth, I mostly felt a vast quiet, a gentle relief. For the first time in what must have been decades, I was living like a person again. Not just a helper, not just mom. For so long, I believed old age meant keeping close to children and grandchildren. Now, I see the truth. To remain by your own side, to befriend your own heart again, is the greatest grace of all. We learn, growing up, that mothers must always give and always forgive. But mothers, I've learned, are people too. Women, first and always. And women, like all people, deserve to be loved, respected, and heard. If someone denies you those simple things, you have the right, not just to wish for something better, but to leave in search of it. If you're reading this, I imagine you might wonder, am I just someone's burden? Have I lost track of myself, trying so hard to measure up to what others expect? If the answer is yes, even a little, then please stop. Just for a moment, sit with yourself. Ask these questions. Am I living or merely existing for someone else's comfort? Is there space in this home for my own voice? How many times have I cried alone, only to wipe away the tears and pretend they never fell? If you find your heart answering yes, then you are not the only one. I walked that road before you. But I found a way forward. It was not easy. I did not change in a day, nor find instant strength. But I promise you, Even the hard-won peace is worth every ounce. I remember the night it all came clear. My bones broken, my heart even more so. I listened to Laura's voice, cold, decisive. Call a cab. I waited for Michael to defend me, but he turned away. That is when I knew I had been silent too long. It was time, at last, to have a voice again. You have the right to say how you feel, to make your own choices, to put yourself first sometimes, without shame. So now, I sit here, in a cozy, sun-bright rest stop on the coast, halfway through my slow, meandering trip around the United States, seeing what small joys each town holds. Through the window, I watch gentle waves wash up on the beach. Outside, a girl leads her grandmother by the hand and laughs, full and free. I smile back, quietly, and write this all in my notebook. A story not of endings, but of brave, hopeful beginnings. I no longer have that house to call my own. Yet, I still have a place I can return to. My pride, that sense of self-worth I finally reclaimed. I will not ask anyone for thanks, nor expect any sort of payback. All I want is the strength to remember my own name, and to hold on to it, no matter what may come. Once upon a time, I was the kind of mother who always stood a step behind, careful to let others take up the center. That was the old me. But now, I am a woman who walks forward on her own 2 feet. I move by my own will, and in my own time, making my own choices. So I wonder, how about you? If you too have kept silent for a long time, please listen to me. That silence you bear, the habit of saying nothing, of shrinking your hopes until they fit in the smallest corners, might one day cause someone to wake up and decide to sell the house? Tomorrow morning? Before you've ever spoken your truth, before it all comes to that, please, let me hear your story. Let me know what rests in your heart. Don't worry about being perfect, or about having all the right words. Just begin with your own name. Tell your story, and remember, there is nothing more precious than discovering you have the right and the courage to make your own fate. I will listen, truly listen, because you are not alone, and neither am I. Let's start over as who we really are, not just in someone else's story, but in our own. That is all I wish for, now and always.